check out my Patreon.
Alright, tag along. This is going to be another one of my shorter reviews, seeing as this is one of those episodes that lacks a lot of substance. It's a very bare-bones story with minimal intricacies that leads to an all-around uninteresting watch. And as such, probably an uninteresting review, although I will do my best to present my thoughts and make the video as solid as possible. Even still, I feel like I'm grasping at straws here. That said, let's just dive into Tag Along and see how dry and forgettable this one really is.
Blossom, if we're going to get to the state science fair on time, we have to leave now.
But I'm not done with my project yet!
You'll have to go with Plan B.
Okay, Professor!
So the episode begins with Blossom working on her science fair project at the very last minute. You'd think Blossom, being the organized and well-managed person that she is, she would have fully prepared for this way in advance. Man, what is it with all these episodes and science expos lately? Of the last 5 episodes I've reviewed, 3 of them have included a science event of some kind, and none of them have had anything to do with each other. Hell, 4 of the last 10 episodes have included something like this because Lights Out had that Towntopia event that also acted as a science expo. But as I said, she's finishing up her science fair project while the professor is yelling at her that it's time to go. And considering she didn't finish her project on time, which I reiterate is super out of character for the reboot's depiction of Blossom, she has to go with her Plan B project instead. Now, could she have spent time improving and enhancing the minuscule details all the way up until the last minute? Absolutely, but to not even finish it is something I don't buy for a second. Regardless, she and the professor are headed to a science fair while Buttercup and Bubbles stay home, and the focus shifts over from Blossom's science fair project to the wacky hijinks that Buttercup and Bubbles are bound to get into. This is almost like the opposite of road tripping in a way. Instead of focusing on the professor and his daughter with periodic cutbacks to the other girls at home, this time it focuses on the girls at home with periodic cutbacks to the professor. And of course, Blossom and Bubbles are swapped.
Science fair, here we come!
So they leave, and Bubbles gets all excited to spend time with her sister while Buttercup gets entirely annoyed because she wants this 100th issue special edition of the Space Tow Trek comic book and doesn't want her sister screwing it up for her, saying things like how her hands are always sticky or she won't take care of it.
What should we do first, Buttercup? Read to Octi? Drink tea with Octi? Do a choreographed dance created by Octi? Bubbles!
All Bubbles really wants to do is party with Octi, so I get why she doesn't comprehend the level of value that this has to Buttercup, but that's no reason to not let Bubbles come with her, especially because the professor specifically instructs the two of them to stick together before he leaves. Although that in itself is questionable because usually he puts Schedulebot in charge whenever he leaves, and yet this time the character doesn't even show up. He doesn't put anyone in charge. Not that I'm complaining, mind you, but it is an inconsistency that I noticed.
You'll ruin it! Your hands are always sticky.
No, they're not.
Ugh. Look, you're eating taffy right now.
It's just so stretchy and sweet.
Well, next we get a montage as Bubbles follows Buttercup all around the city as she tries to escape her, leading to your typical the chaser beats the chase to all of their hiding spots jokes. You've seen it all before, but there is a nice detail of a popped red balloon in a sewer drain where Buttercup hides, so cue another point for subtle pop culture references. As we all know, the more indirect ones are the best ones in this show. Buttercup loses Bubbles and makes her way downtown, walking fast, faces pass, and she's store-bound.
Yeah! I got it! The last copy! In your face, everyone who isn't me!
Hey, yeah, fuck you. This clip right here is all I need to show people to explain why she's my least favorite character of the 3 girls. Looks like she snagged the very last comic book and rubs it in all the other people's faces, and while she is a complete jerk to them, it's not like the citizens of Townsville don't deserve ridicule either for all of the horrible things that they've done in this show. Nobody here is a good person. It's just jerks being jerks to jerks. What bothers me even more though is what Bubbles chooses to do when she finds her sister again.
Wow, can I see? Oh, my sticky hands. I'm sorry. Here.
Okay, to be fair, Buttercup did explicitly tell her she didn't want her to touch her comic book because of how sticky her hands were. So really, this is Bubbles' fault for ruining that comic book. I mean, this wasn't even an accident. How in any way did she think that was a good idea? She literally ends up ripping it in two when she tries to help Buttercup fix it, but that only results in a worse outcome as Buttercup flips out trying to put it back together by any means necessary. Not gonna lie though, it bothers me that Bubbles' nubs just lose their sticky property when it's convenient for Buttercup to be able to take it back from her because she has no issues doing whatsoever even though Bubbles couldn't let go just 20 seconds prior. I'm sorry, but taffy isn't selectively sticky. It doesn't work that way. The least this show could have done was show the portion of the comic book tear off and stay stuck to Bubbles because really, if the episode just established that Buttercup couldn't pull the comic book off of Bubbles, then why could she pull the comic book off of Bubbles after nothing had changed? She could have also tried heating up the taffy with her heat beams or something. But the two girls return home and come up short until she and Bubbles get into a fight right next to Blossom's science fair project, yielding some interesting results. And this is where it gets weird.
Ugh, nice going, Bubbles. Wait a... Bubbles? Where'd you go?
I'm right here, Buttercup.
Huh?
So after the explosion, Buttercup and Bubbles turned into some sort of crazy mixed up puff. Wait, crazy mixed up puff? Hey, wait a minute. We're back to just doing what the original already did. Again. But to be fair, this is one of the most overdone tropes as far as storytelling is concerned, especially in animation. What bothers me more is that Buttercup got to keep her entire body, but now Bubbles is just a head attached to Buttercup like a tail. And it just doesn't surprise me that Buttercup gets to keep total control of her body, while Bubbles is reduced to nothing but a head because of course it's written in favor of the green one. She's the one that gets agency, not Bubbles. Basically, now there is no way they can escape each other, so at least the professor would be happy about that, but they catch wind of Mojo, who's currently attempting to pull off his latest evil scheme to destroy the Townsville Dam. Here's another question I've been meaning to ask. How does the mayor inexplicably know which girl to call? Like, did he call Blossom first and he got no answer? Because I'm sure if she received this call, she'd leave the science fair to go protect the city, you know? All that really happens here is a bunch of filler time where Mojo spoils some of the Space Tow Truck comic because he just so happens to have a copy of it as well. And Buttercup loses her mind that she gets spoiled because she's wanted to read that issue for months. Yeah, sure, there's also the part where Buttercup and Bubbles attempt Operation Battlestar, but Bubbles interprets it as turn into a starfish, thus creating more tension between the two. But really the only talking point here is the spoiler thing, as that is the final straw in all of this. It's meant to be overdramatic because LOL, no spoilers, and yeah, now we're just taking 2 steps back in the humor department. Not to mention that it's Bubbles' fault for even mentioning that Buttercup hadn't read it yet in the first place.
No spoilers.
Oh, really? Then you'll be happy to know that on page 54... Space Cat grows wings!
So logically, Buttercup gets furious with Bubbles over this while Mojo just sorta rolls on out of there, and meanwhile Blossom is presenting her baking soda Volcano, which is praised for originality compared to all of the other students who just so happen to all make a DNA transfusion formula akin to the one Blossom was going to bring instead of this as backup. Needless to say, it's just playing on the opposite of what would be expected to happen, which can be funny under the right circumstances, but this doesn't go far enough with the idea to even warrant a chuckle.
Not like those DNA combining projects everybody else brought.
Aww.
It's okay, son. Better luck next year.
There isn't anything that really makes me go, wow, hey, that was a really unexpected but cool idea. Nope, it's just... and then the opposite happens. The whole reason Mojo is even going out in this tank is to destroy the Townsville Dam so he can have a great view of the lake from his volcano, and he goes so far as to demolish the vehicles parked in his way to do it. So the senseless killing via crushing people inside their automobiles without any means of escape is totally okay to depict on screen, but the girls can't fight like real superheroes and save people. Great priorities there. Good job. Honestly though, Mojo plowing through the highway is the only aspect of this I like, and he continues to do so after leaving Buttercup face down on the ground in defeat as he approaches the dam. It's this moment where Buttercup tells Bubbles to shut up and not do anything, which causes her to feel extremely sad and upset because she was just trying to be friendly with her as any sibling would want to. I really kind of feel bad for Bubbles here. I mean, yes, the original comic book being torn up is all her fault, and she did instigate Mojo to spoil things for Buttercup, so there's really zero excuse for that. But everything else is just Buttercup taking out her rage on Bubbles and being a total asshat because she thinks Bubbles intentionally goes out of her way to ruin things for her. I think this episode does do a decent job of justifying both girls' feelings at this moment in the episode. But the tension leads Bubbles to just stay out of Buttercup's way as she catches back up to Mojo and attacks him a few times because she doesn't want to upset her sister any more than she already has.
Good thing Mojo wasn't wearing his seatbelt.
You know, hey, that, at the very least, I do appreciate that small detail of Mojo's seatbelt being connected to him while all of Buttercup's hit flashes are shown. That was a really good attention to detail. And thanks to these proper safety procedures, this doesn't do much to Mojo, and he smacks her square in the face when she's busy gloating with her eyes closed while Bubbles just sits there and lets it happen, causing Buttercup to pass out as they both fall to the ground. Luckily, Bubbles decides that saving her sister from an impact softer than what they've already been established to be able to survive was her #1 priority in this moment. And then they just make up with each other because reasons. I don't really see how this warrants Buttercup to change her attitude and Bubbles to apologize for what she did. I mean, I get that Buttercup realizing Bubbles helped her is supposed to be that catalyst, but the execution just feels like total whiplash sending us in the other direction. It seems super sudden and spontaneous, just like a lot of the other episode conclusions in season 3 especially. It feels like this is more of a leap rather than well-paced steps forward.
Get ready for Operation Taffy Tangle! Now, Bubs!
Roger that!
Hey, remember when Buttercup said she couldn't lead in Salamander? Why is she leading right here then? Because last I checked, the show's justification for her not leading was that she got the girls into a near-death situation, even though that happens all the time regardless of who's leading. But more importantly, the fact that the show acknowledges Buttercup can't lead because of this reason is what makes it so problematic, especially when she's depicted as essentially taking over all of Blossom's responsibilities now that she's out of the picture, while Bubbles continues to tag along for the ride, pun intended. Consistency. This show doesn't know the meaning of the word. And so together they take down Mojo using the rubbery properties of the connector between Bubbles and Buttercup, and they destroy Mojo's hammer tank from the inside out. With success in hand, they return home for the rest of the night, and we later see the professor and Blossom walk through the door with trophy in hand, ending the episode off on admittedly the best joke of the entire episode.
Where's Bubbles? I thought I told you to stick together.
We did!
A rather plain story, all things considered. I mean, as I said earlier, the idea of characters getting fused or stuck together is really overdone trope in all sorts of shows, and this episode just doesn't do anything to stand out amongst them. This mostly fell flat, although it's certainly not the worst of its kind. Tagalong is just another unmemorable, lackluster PPG 2016 episode for me. I don't like Buttercup's attitude or Bubbles' blatant ignoring of her sister's wishes, and the revelation at the end comes on unrealistically fast. Not to mention the fact that Bubbles and Buttercup are shown to have a lot of detention and distrust amongst each other for a good chunk of this episode leading up to the climax, but the very last episode we covered, Our Brand is Chaos, depicted both of the girls getting along perfectly well. They were doing great. They even pooled their money together to get a bobsled and enter a worldwide bobsled competition. I honestly find it really difficult to believe that these two would have this kind of tension with each other when they literally did the opposite last episode. This show loves to just force its characters into whatever role it needs them to be for the sake of whatever episode idea it's going for, without considering whether or not it actually makes sense for the characters. It's been doing this for 3 seasons, and clearly it's never learned from its mistakes. So, all in all, this one's boring. Just forget it ever happened.